Hello there and welcome to another episode of the Metagame. This is the online streaming show on the Dice Tower channel where we will not only be talking about board games, but also periodically talking about board games. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, and the way this show works is I'm going to first present a short topic, and I'll give a short presentation on it and give you my thoughts, and then afterwards I am going to skim through the YouTube comments for questions, and we'll have an informal Q&A session about this topic, and really today, this topic and anything else on your minds that you have a question about. So, one of the things to do with your post, if you are watching this show live as it's going, and you have a comment, question, or other item that you want to have considered for inclusion on the show, be sure to include the hashtag TMG for the metagame in your comment that you post. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my web browser's search tool to highlight the posts that contain that hashtag, make them kind of float to the top, and they'll be the ones that grab my attention. As always, I don't usually get a chance to get to all of the comments, so I apologize if I don't get to yours, but I do try to go back and reread the entire comments after the show, so just to make sure nothing gets missed. Alright, today's episode is going to start just as soon as I check the comments to make sure that you guys can actually hear me. Audio sounds muffled. Alright, I'm going to ask you, is this any better? Does this make any difference to the audio quality? Does it sound less muffled? We have a very razor thin margin between muffled and too hot. So I always got to try and dial in on that. So we'll see if that gets... So while we're waiting for someone to see if this is any better audio quality, I do want to mention that today's episode is almost not brought to you by storms. Yes, storms. Remember that vertical tree you used to have in your yard that's now a horizontal tree? That's the power of storms. So, like I mentioned, today's show almost didn't happen because there was a huge storm, and it turns out that it wasn't a huge storm that came through last night. It was a comparatively small storm, and I guess the weather says that there are not one, not two, but there's 4 more storm fronts coming through our state over the weekend. So it's going to be a very windy, very blustery, kind of challenging weekend. So now they say it's... Okay. Hang on. Okay. Hopefully that's in the middle. So hopefully that's probably as good as we're going to get with the audio today. So I'll try to speak in a reasonable tone. But let's not waste any more time with storm talk and mic talk. Let's actually talk about today's topic, which is board gaming etiquette. Now, I have 2 examples of how I've encountered board gaming etiquette, and so I wanted to share those, and then what I wanted to get from the audience is any examples you have where you've encountered house rules or situations that completely caught you off guard, where you realized that you inadvertently were offending someone while you played, and what you did to resolve it. Because that's part of being a human being, especially with this social activity of board gaming that we human beings are engaging in, is we're going to encounter other people. And other people have different motivations and convictions. So, for example, a basic, simple example of this is I was playing a game of a deck builder with a gentleman. It was his copy of his deck builder. And came time to shuffle the cards, and so I grabbed the cards and gave them what's called a riffle shuffle, which is the basic generic shuffle where you just take the cards and shuffle them together, and his face went white. And I still had the cards in my fingers, and I looked at him and was like, oh, would you prefer me not to riffle shuffle? And he looked at me shuffling his cards this way, where you kind of just take the cards sideways and kind of move, splice them together this way. He's like, yes, please don't riffle shuffle the cards. And that's when I learned in that game to always, when playing someone else's game, always ask, because some people feel that damages their cards, and that's completely acceptable. And it's just something I never thought of, because I've always riffle shuffled, and I try not to bend the cards too bad when I do it, but it was just second nature to me. So encountering that, I realized, oh, this is something where I'm playing with his game. There's a little bit of etiquette here that probably I've offended other people with without even realizing it. So I learned to change my own behavior to ask that simple thing. And simply asking goes a long way. And I have since then, I'd say about 50% of the time, encountered people who are like, oh yeah, don't riffle shuffle. And the other 50% of the time, they don't care. So it's really interesting. And I never would have thought about that or known until I asked. And it's just one of the things that we just learn as trying to be better gamers. But then, every now and then, you have a situation that you encounter that you feel there's no way you could have prepared for it. But it's just as legitimate as someone not wanting their cards bent by riffle shuffling. Here's the situation. Allow me to verbally paint this picture for your imagination. It was a couple of years ago, and it was game night down at my friendly local game shop. And so I had the rare opportunity where I was able to go down. My daughter was staying at a friend's house, and we didn't have any other plans. And I think my wife was actually out of town that night for doing something else. So it's like, oh wow, I'm going to go down to the local game night. And so I went down there, and kind of didn't know anyone there. A lot of people there were first time attendees. So I sat down with two others. This was the first time any of us had met. We sat down, and we'll say that one of the other players, will call them Stuart, and the other player will call them Oliver. And Stuart brought out Pixel Lincoln. It's like, oh, cool. Okay, I'd heard a lot about this game. I never had a chance to play it. Let's play some Pixel Lincoln. Well, like I said, we'd never met before. So the game started out very quiet, very reserved, learning the game. We learned it, and we started playing. We started getting the hang of it, started getting used to each other's company a little bit. And so midway through the game, we started to feel a little more comfortable with each other, and some mild in-game banter started. Nothing like trash talk or anything like that, but just everybody engaging in some witty banter forthwith. So as we're going along, we start talking about the game itself and other things. Oliver mentions that they don't know if they cared for this game. And I thought, from someone who immerses themselves in so much statistical analysis and competitive analysis of board games, I thought that they were speaking purely from a standpoint of the mechanisms and the gameplay of the game. And because it is kind of a different type of game. Pixel Lincoln is a game. It's kind of a card-driven game for the most part that replicates a side-scrolling 1980s Nintendo game, a kind of a platform scroller, where the character that you are controlling is a little Abraham Lincoln, and all the art is pixely, and all the enemies are pixely and everything. And there's weapons like beard boomerangs and stovepipe hat stuff and things like that. So you're using all of these iconic things about Abraham Lincoln as your weapons and your special abilities and everything like that. So it has this very strong character. It has this theme, and it's all tongue-in-cheek, and it's all done very lightheartedly, but that's what the game is about. So after Oliver mentioned that they didn't know if they cared for this game, that's where my mind was at. It's like, well, with the way that you scroll through the different tiles in the game, I can see that, and the way that things reset and the way you play the cards. Yeah, I can understand not really knowing how you felt about this game. But then Oliver mentioned that their problem was actually that they felt that the theme of using Abraham Lincoln as an adventure-type video game character was disrespectful. And I am not mocking Oliver for that. I can understand that, but that completely caught me off guard. So my brain went, quick, do something to break the ice, do something to break the tension, do something. My mouth wasn't prepared yet, though. But my brain was urging my mouth, do something to break this tension. So it was such an out-of-the-blue statement. And I thought they were making a joke that I replied with something like, too soon? An awkward, eerie silence fell over the game. There we were in a crowded, friendly local game shop after hours, filled with at least several dozen other gamers playing games. But this dampening aura of awkward silence fell over our game so heavily that it somehow muffled all the other people in the game shop. You could hear the flick of the cards as they went on the table, the scooting of our chairs as we restlessly tried to regain our composure. I looked over at Stuart for help, and Stuart just looked at me with this expression that just said, "You're on your own, dude." And I knew that it was every man for themselves at that point. So before I could put my foot further into my mouth, fortunately, Oliver went on to describe with complete seriousness how they had such great respect for the 16th president and why, and how this game undermined that, and they admired Abraham so much that they named their first child Lincoln. My brain decided at that point, just apologize. So I stumbled out a clumsy, hushed apology, and the rest of the game was completed as quickly as possible, after which we immediately excused each other and immediately fled the scene. So in that game, there was a lesson learned, and that's something that is completely different than how you shuffle the cards. It's more relating to people. Whether it's something related to the care of the game, such as how the cards are shuffled, or a person's personal beliefs and likes or dislikes. One of the challenges that we who partake in the social activity of board gaming need to continually remain cognizant of is that everybody else is not us, and to treat others with respect. And it's not always easy to do. Even when you want to, it's something that you can fail at. We're not going to succeed 100% of the time. But making an effort and extending some understanding does go a long way. Just one of the greatest words of wisdom that I have ever heard was simply, someone told me, never diss another man's convictions. If someone is convicted, that they are never going to wear blue because out of respect for something that they really believe in, so be it. That's their personal conviction, and it's not our place to judge them for that. But they can sneak up on you in such a surprising way that they can cause a lot of embarrassment. And that embarrassment at the time can lead to knee-jerk reactions of becoming very defensive. But if we can not fall into that trap, we can sometimes, with enough time passing afterwards, come away with an amusing story an embarrassing story, but definitely a memory. So those are the two prime examples that I have of how I learned to be aware and extend board gaming etiquette. And I always kind of keep my feelers up when playing games with other people to try to make myself cognizant of other people and realize that other people are not me, and try to extend a courtesy to others who don't necessarily share the same opinions or convictions that I do. And I think it's all part of, like I said, partaking in this social activity of board games. So now I'm going to turn over to the chat area, and what I want to know is what horrible experiences have you had? Regale me with your own tales of true board gaming terror, or just things that you've learned about board gaming etiquette. So let's go over here to the comment section, which I've moved into place. And the first comment comes from show regular and first commenter regular, Kabuki Kid, who has a short story or short anecdote here. Kabuki mentions to us all that I personally probably don't have much to contribute to this one. But I do remember one time playing at my meetup group, and we always do friendly trash talking, and this one new player really seemed to not like it. So I know that I definitely halted goofing around like that when I noticed their apparent discomfort. They must have been very sensitive, though, apparently. It reminded me of a former coworker I had who was very sensitive, and when she would get constructive criticism, she would take it very personally and get upset. And I wonder if the meetup person had the same sort of issues. I'm glad I was reading that before we started, because that was one of the comments that actually came in before we went live, and I wanted to touch on that, and because I do not want to come across as inferring anything about your post, Kabuki Kid. I'm not saying you did this. Your post to me is completely neutral, but one of the things in here about wondering if this person has emotional baggage or something is something a very dangerous trap that we as board gamers and people who live on this dirtball planet we're on. One of the things that we can run into is when we encounter someone who does kind of do something that surprises us, catches us off guard, and embarrasses us this way. One of our knee-jerk reactions can be to reverse the blame back onto them and say, "Oh, that person must have some emotional baggage," or that person, must have an issue with something. Well, by taking that, it removes our own responsibility out of the equation. Maybe this person is really sensitive to certain things, but then as the hosts or their companions in this activity, it becomes our responsibility to become aware of that and try to accommodate that. There are, of course, extremes. If someone's just unreasonable, that's a completely different topic. But we all have things that make up our personality. So, like I said, Kabuki Kid brought up a really good point. I don't think Kabuki Kid's point was saying this person was just out of their gourd. I don't think that's the case. But I think that the comment had some items in it that reminded me of this, and I wanted to bring that up. All right, let's continue to Prehawk. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Also, Prehawk, thank you for the weather ritual before we started. It seems to have made the rain pause, so we're between storms, so I appreciate that. And the lizard hands have returned to normal, so that was only temporary, thank goodness. Anyway, Prehawk's question or statement is, I have always had all the D&D books, but never got to play a game of it. My first RPG was a Call of Cthulhu game where the person running it had a strict RPG rule that stated that we were all to stay in character all the time. He had sounds and changed lighting throughout, So now I come to expect that level of detail and thought in a game master if they decide to run games. I'm not sure if this fits, but there you go. Well, this is kind of flipping it. This is actually, I think it's fortunate that this is one of the first comments that we've come across, because this flips the idea around. Here, instead of having an uncomfortable situation established by someone's approach to gaming or house rules or beliefs in how games should be run, your early experience was someone who set the bar really high and gave a really interesting experience with the way the effort and their convictions on how a game should run. It is a little bit of a different topic here. I'm not going to try and force it together too much. It's not like it wasn't this person's necessarily their beliefs or convictions or something, but it is something where a positive experience then changed your attitude towards future role-playing sessions. And something that, like I said, is kind of the reverse. In a worst-case scenario, it could become where that player now expects and has, is disruptive and complains in other RPG sessions where the host, the game master, isn't doing those. It reminds me, I haven't had the best D&D experiences in my life. I think I mentioned this in my Top 100 series at one point. But I've played quite a few different RPG games, but there's something about D&D for some reason. I've never walked away from a D&D game going, that was a wonderful experience. One of them was a case of me coming in to having kind of a culture shock issue. This was just not smart. My wife and I, about a decade ago, were invited to go over to a coworker's house to join them in a night of D&D. It's like, wow, cool! They want to have us join them in their D&D. So they had been playing for years, and maybe this campaign they were doing, it was nearing its end, and they'd been working on this campaign for like 8 months or something. So they had established characters that were ending their story, whatever. So we came in, and I'd played D&D maybe half a dozen times at this point. So I wasn't really sure what I was doing. My wife has played it even less than that. So we made characters, and we were playing. I remember my wife was on the other side of the room as me. So we were watching across each other. And the players were... we were shoved into the middle of this story. They were in some dungeon fighting skeletons. Stuff was going on. One player was ready to retire his character, so he didn't care what was going on, and we were just kind of along for the ride in a way. My wife, though, was doing great. She would have combat checks or other skill checks, and she'd roll her dice, and she'd be like, oh, I got it, and she'd go, oh, I got that, oh, no, I failed this one, and she was just having a blast. I was sitting there struggling. I didn't know what they wanted me to roll, what they expected me to do in the group. It was horrible. And at the end of it, one of the players who was going to retire his character anyway, we were splitting up the loot or something, and he didn't get the item that he wanted. So his solution was, I slit my own throat. And it's like, okay, that was a bit extreme and kind of rude, but more gold for the rest of us. So the night was ended soon after that. And my wife and I, on the drive home, we were talking about the horrible experience that we just had, and talking about how we approached this situation differently. There was the character who slit his own throat, who basically wanted to end his character with a certain triumphant manner, and when it didn't happen, just said, okay, screw it, I slit my own throat, forget it, I'm done with this. Then we have the other characters who didn't make us feel included as much. There was me, who was bumbling along and not really contributing from lack of experience or knowing what was going on. But then there was my wife, who took like a fish to water and was rolling and looking up the checks and consulting tables and doing things, and you knew when she failed, knew when she succeeded. I was like, how in the world is it that I struggled so much in this game, but you did so well? And she looked at me and she said, can I tell you a secret? It's like, sure, as long as in a decade I could share this with the entire internet. She's like, okay, fair enough. And she said, I had no idea what I was doing. I just rolled the dice, and no matter what I rolled, I just in my head would say, I succeeded. And then I'd think, I've succeeded a few times now. I failed. And she was just making she was making it up 100% of it, completely fabricating every roll she made, whether she succeeded or not. And at that moment, I realized she thinks on a completely higher level than I do, and I'm never, ever going to be able to beat her at any game that we play, not because of cheating, but because talking about the metagame, she thinks 8,000 steps ahead of me. Anyway, but there we have a situation where one person bumbled through, one person had a temper tantrum when they didn't get what they want, and one person pretended not to bumble through. And it was just, I'm sorry, Park, we went on a rabbit trail here, but your question, your statement reminded me of this, and it fits into this etiquette thing. Here were three people who approached this situation with completely different approaches to etiquette. I'll be honest, what's the end result? I don't know. Who was right? I'm not going to claim that my wife's approach was wise, or that me trying to do the sincere bumbling approach was wise, or the guy who wanted to have the great story to tell about his character was the right one. But it was just a very strange situation that has, like you, with your really good experience, has tainted the way that I will see future D&D sessions. So the door, like I said, the door swings both ways on that. And I think maybe the takeaway is that we can't let previous gaming experiences necessarily color our approach to future gaming experiences. Because if we do, we'll be carrying that baggage that will taint, for better or worse, the experience for us going forward. And that's not fair to ourselves, because it won't let us enjoy the game, as much as we could. But boy howdy, it was an experience. Okay, going back to the neat-o comment section here, let's try and speed up, because that was a tangent. So let's continue back with the chat. Pith's Attic comes down to tell us rule number 1 for etiquette: be humble in victory. True. Rule number 2: don't play the game for someone else. For example, person A telling person C what to do. Oh, hate that. Very true. Be humble in victory. Sometimes I think that being humble in victory can even be more important than being humble in defeat, though don't want to be a sore loser. But so I think that's very good as rule number 1. And not to play the game for someone else. Don't be the alpha gamer who basically has everyone else sitting around watching you play the game for everyone else. We're there to interact and make decisions and figure things out. Oh boy. Okay. Then there's a lot of discussion in the comments about alpha gaming, which I'll scroll through here because a lot of interpersonal talk. Christian mentions another slight divergence here. Christian has a general question of why are you not at Essen? The Essen Game Fair is going on right now, and so I am still in Oregon enjoying the weather. I'm not at Essen. There's no real good reason. There's no reason really why I would need to be. Essentially, the Dice Tower and Passport, who I am associated with, are at Essen, but they already, before I even came on board this year with both of those, I think they already had their plans for Essen figured out. And obviously, going to Essen is not a simple, cheap, or easy thing to configure, so I think it would have been inappropriate for me to shoehorn myself into Essen plans in some way. And honestly, my wife has told me that I am welcome to go to Essen in the future, but I'm taking her with me. So when I go to Essen, if and when it happens, it's probably going to be more family vacation type of thing than me just going for the Essen Spiel trade show. But anyway, if I was at Essen, we wouldn't be able to be having this conversation right now. So let's return to the conversation. Thank you for your question. I appreciate the thoughts because it would be awesome to go to Essen someday. But first things first. Let's talk about embarrassing things that have happened to us all. Mike Jones, no really, mentions, no, it's fine unless you're picky. Geez. I'm not sure what that's in response to. I'm sorry. I think that might have been in response to something that was not highlighted in the comments. So let's continue on. All right. Let's return to our original topic of riffle shuffling. Kabuki mentions, I say that riffle shuffling is fine, but always ask if you can riffle shuffle someone else's cards or magic deck or something. All right. Absolutely agree, and this shows me that the comments now are, we've caught up to the part where we started the conversation. This is great. I'd say that Kabuki mentions, I'd say sleeved cards and mash shuffling. Is that the actual term for it, when you take the cards and kind of just split the deck and push them back together? Mash shuffling. That's cool if that's the actual name. I didn't know what it's called, but that's the way to do it. Oh, and then someone asks right after, mash shuffling? So apparently I'm not the only one who has never heard of that phrase. Hey, maybe we can coin that phrase today. Maybe we should call it Chaz should go to Essen shuffling. If that catches on, that could get me in a lot of trouble. So let's stick with mash shuffling. Ooh, or Hawkeye Pierce shuffling. Okay, let's continue to the next question, which is from Adam. Adam mentions etiquette on enforcing rules. I have not been ruled. I have been labeled as a quote-unquote rule Nazi on occasion. Just trying to make sure that we are playing the game as intended, not trying to be rude or ruin the experience. That can be a tricky situation, sir, because I think with that, making sure that a game is being played as the game is intended to be played is critical to the game playing experience. If you're playing the game wrong, you're not actually playing the game, and that's what you're there to do. So yes, playing it by the rules is critical. So why is this so touchy? Because in that situation, I don't think it's the action that's being taken, checking the rules for accuracy, but I think that one is completely the approach that the person takes to doing it. It's something that often needs to be done with a great amount of diplomacy. Otherwise, people will get defensive, thinking you're judging, hey, you're doing this wrong, you're an idiot. And so to find a way to diplomatically say, hey, let's check this. It's all about the manner in which the idea is presented. Hey, let's double check on this. And so if someone is really blunt, it can put them in a bad light, even if they ask the same question in a not blunt way. Sometimes blunt, though, is the way to do it. I'm not saying there's a specific way to double check the rules, just saying it is something that needs to be handled with care, because rule checking like that mid-game is definitely something that can lead to some confrontation, people feeling bad. I don't know if there's any one correct approach. One thing that's happened in my game group every now and then, which seems to have worked, is we'll be playing a game, and after someone's turn ends, and they have to wait till all the other players go, they'll say, hey, can I see the rule book? And they'll take the rule book, and they'll quietly thumb through it until it gets back around to their turn, and then they'll say, guys, I think we're supposed to be blah, 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 blah. And they'll kind of say, because I was wondering about that. So they take a very unobtrusive approach. They double check their facts beforehand, and there's times that they'll pick up the rule book, and when it gets back to their turn, they'll just kind of put it down and put it aside. Either they didn't find what they're looking for, or they realize that we are playing it right. But that might be one way to make it less obtrusive. I don't know. I've seen that approach taken by several different people, and it seems to be very non-confrontational. So if that helps, there you go. Toyota mentions rules lawyers, still on the same topic, rules lawyers who always want to consult the manual. Well, maybe I just put my foot in my mouth. Rules lawyers who always want to consult the manual and BGG and slows gameplay down to the point where you want to cry. I dislike rules lawyers. Well, perhaps that is one vote against what I just described, because that sounds almost identical to the situation that I just mentioned. So again, I think it is all in the way that the person does it, the way that they behave while they're doing it. Yeah, you don't want to slow down the game. The way that you consult the manual, the way that you bring it up, how much you let it interfere with the gameplay, all of those things are things to consider. Apparently, though, it is true, there is no correct one way to do it. All right, Benjamin mentions, hopefully something else. Benjamin mentions, I had someone once pick up a card by putting 2 fingers on top of the card and then squeezing them together, bending the card and lifting it, and it almost made me cry. That's a sad tale. Now, see, that's one of those things. The riffle shuffling, you can do it in such a way that's not bending the cards. But I can still see how people don't want it, because it's a very, aggressive way to shuffle things. It can damage the cards. But pinching your fingers together, squeezing to pick up the cards, I don't even, personally speaking, I don't know what someone is thinking. I don't know how someone could even do that. It just seems so obvious that that's damaging the game components. But not everyone is as cognizant as other players, so it's something to watch out for. So lesson here from that is don't do that. Don't bend the cards. I'm sure. I bet you that there's other stories of people that just absent-mindedly do things with the game components that make others of us cringe, even the way we handle dice for other things. And it's strange how many little things can be obvious to one person, but not obvious to another. Let's see if we can find any others in the list here. Mike Jones mentions, unless you are at a tournament, there's no need to be a rules lawyer. I can see that. I don't know if I 100% agree with that one, just because I think it just depends on the gaming environment. If I'm playing with my kid, I'm not going to be as much as a rules lawyer. But if I'm playing with several people from my game group who really want to get into a game and are really into gaming and want to appreciate the game for what it is, we might be a little more strict with the rules. So, excuse me a second. I apologize for having a human body. All right. Mike continues, I have never been offended during open game night, but I can't make it as much as others do. So maybe I'm just too excited that I'm actually there. So that might be a reason where the excitement lets a lot of stuff roll off your back. That is definitely a good point. I know when I'm at some of the larger conventions with people I don't know, I know that I am excited to be there and also don't know the people as well. And so I let a lot of extra stuff roll off my back as opposed to when I have a couple of friends over at my house and there's maybe 4 of us. We sometimes can get a lot more nitpicky. So definitely excitement levels and the environment you're at can definitely have an impact on that. Toyota mentions again, I had a guy storm out of a game night because he and another guy were getting mad at each other because the one guy didn't want to play the game and he didn't listen to the rules and he kept messing up. Well, that's just rude. Again, well, I wasn't there. I can't, that's coming to conclusions a little bit. But if you don't want to play a game, I would think etiquette would dictate don't play the game. And conversely, if someone doesn't want to play the game, don't force them to. It's not going to be conducive to a good time for anybody. And it's going to lead to situations like what you just described. All right. And the comments jumped, so we're going to need to recombobulate here as we get the comments back online. So let's see here. Mash shuffling. Oh. Simple etiquette if you get a cell phone call from your wife that you are divorcing, walk away from the game table. Please. I think we may have a winner for the most awkward situation possible. Congratulations. That puts my Abraham Lincoln story to shame with one simple sentence. Yes, if you receive an important or very personal phone call, I would hope that all of your fellow players would understand and encourage you to go take it away from the table. Because one person being uncomfortable is better than everybody being uncomfortable, right? All right. Homemaker Hobbies, hello, comes by to share this story. We had a guy at game night get so mad during Lords of Waterdeep, he rage quit and went and watched cartoons with the kids. We had to guess what he would have done so we could finish the game. That is really interesting. I have never been in a situation where I have seen someone rage quit. I've seen some people get really upset and become really quiet, but I've never seen someone actually rage quit and leave the game. I've had some people after a game say, I'm never playing with this specific person ever again. But that's nice in a way that you were able, the rest of you were able to work together to not have the game be ruined completely. That your group was able to work together to overcome that obstacle. Better question though, what cartoon was he watching? That's a good question. Okay, Toyota mentions again. Another part of the previous story was especially the part when he's like, well, I bought that board game on that credit card, so do we have to talk about this right now? So lots of times ownership of the game obviously can, who's presenting the game to who, and damaging the game is definitely going to be a large part of it. Boy, I'm starting to feel bad for all of you guys with these stories, and I'm starting to not want to go into great detail enough. Hopefully I can shoulder that burden for all of us today, though. Christian mentions, I have experienced that someone getting angry because some of the players in the game, including me, were talking about something that was not game related. Oh, there we go. How focused on the game do you need to be? Actually, my most recent game club meeting here in town, I was guilty of that. I had a very specific time that I had to leave. So we were there, and someone asked me something, and it's like, oh no, I have only 5 minutes. So I had to answer his question, which led to someone else asking a question about it, which led to someone else asking a question about it. And by the end of it, like 15 minutes had gone by, and we were all sitting there going, oh, we completely got sidetracked. Let's finish this game. Fortunately, it involved all of us, so it wasn't one person sitting there. But I did feel bad because I was the instigator of it, and it's one of the things to become aware of keeping the focus on the game as much as possible, because lots of times it can exclude someone who has their whole gameplay experience completely derailed. Toyota mentions again, which is interesting. Have you ever had someone whip out knitting while playing a board game? Actually, yes. In fact, one of the groups I get together, that includes my best friend, is when we get together at a relative's house, of the 5 people at the table, 2 of them actually will whip out knitting while we play. And to be honest, I'd rather have them whip out the knitting than be on their phone, because the knitting is something that after a while you can get to the level of muscle memory where it's almost something your brain is doing in the background, almost like twiddling your thumbs or playing with your poker chips or your dice, which can be really annoying. Boy, and the phone, though, is going to suck up your complete attention. So, but everyone is different. I'm not saying that knitting at the table is good. I'm not saying knitting at the table is bad. I'm saying that if you are going to whip out some knitting at the table, check the temperature of the other players at the table first to see if they care. We personally don't care, but again, we all know each other too as well. So and it also depends on the game. If we're playing a light game, it's not as bad. But if we're trying to finish Pandemic Legacy, the knitting doesn't usually even come out because we're concentrating on the game, and the knitters are aware of that. So it's an interesting question because it underscores how everybody has different things that are and are not as important to them. And finding out from your other players is vitally important to the health of the group. So cool. Here's a question from David, who it's a little bit off-topic question, but it is a question. Chaz, you have blue light reflecting in your glasses. Why is that? I've always wondered. The blue light is because... Oops. No, that's not going to work. Anyway, it's my monitor. My monitor has a blue... the desktop has a blue background. So as I have the chat window up, there's part of the monitor is blue. And I think that's the blue tint. I should try to make it like a red background next time, so it looks like my eyes are glowing red. But anyway, it's just a reflection. I think these glasses also have like a slightly blue tint to the protective coating on them. So that's awesome. Anyway, just a reflection from the computer monitor. All right. Good question, though. For anyone else who's always wondered that, now you know. Here's an interesting one. Toyota mentions again. Here's a fun one for settling rules disputes. I have rock, paper, scissors dice, and the disputers roll those, and the winner is how the rule goes. Makes things resolve quickly. That is interesting, not only because it is a very nice, decisive, completely objective way to solve rules disputes. I like that. It also is interesting to me that it shows how much of a gamer you and your group are, because instead of simply playing rock, paper, scissors, you have rock, paper, scissors dice, which I think is awesome. So it is a good way to settle disputes, completely objective. I guess the dice makes it even more objective, but I think that is cool. Okay, Kabuki mentions, we had one guy show up at our meetup once, and he was really loud and fussed on his phone throughout the rules explanations. It was very, very annoying. He then asked questions during the game that he shouldn't have had to ask. Yeah, pay attention. And she continues, the best part was that he claimed to be a world champion player in Power Grid and claimed he would not lose. And then he lost. And it made Kabuki Kid laugh. Yeah, if you do not need... Oh, boy. There's a whole little sidetrack discussion. Maybe that could possibly even be an entire episode one day. I don't know if it's strong enough to carry an entire episode, but if you already know how to play a game, how do you handle the portion of the rules instruction? I've seen people mention beforehand, I know how to play this, and they play on their phone while it's going on. And since they make it known ahead of time, that seems to help. I've seen people sit and wait patiently and nod at appropriate times. I've seen people compulsively jump in to the rules explanation and help the person who's actually explaining the rules, which has mixed results. I've seen the person excuse themselves to go teach someone else how to play a different game and come back when the rules explanation was done, which is an interesting and cool use of their time, as long as everyone's cool with it. So if you already know how to play a game, there's a whole other level of etiquette of what do you do during the rules explanation. I don't think that... I do think there's lots of different ways that you could use that time, and I think as long as the group, the other players, are aware of how you're planning on using that time, and you kind of tell them why, I think that helps. But just disappearing or something to go get a snack and no one knows where you went, that's probably not a cool way to do it. All right. Toyota mentions too that I've contemplated having a drop box for phones before entering the game room. That is, I've heard other people mention that. that is one of those things that's really interesting. I don't know. I'd like to know if anyone else has had that experience, and if it's been good or bad, because it makes me. Part of me thinks, yeah, that would be good, a special place away from the table for their phones. But then I think about, well, what if someone's trying to get a hold of you in an emergency, or you're on call for work, or you want to take pictures of the game to remember what games you played throughout the day. So I'm mixed. I'm mixed on that. I kind of think it's cool, but I don't know. All right. Bob joins us. Bob mentions, maybe it's just me, but it really bothers me when I'm trying to explain rules and the listeners don't hold questions until the end of the explanation. I know what you're saying there, Bob. I've been in that same situation, and it's another one of those, I don't know, because sometimes the questions are pertinent. But I'll go a little more detail. It bothers me sometimes when you are explaining and someone asks a question which is in the next paragraph that you were about to read or explain, or it's the next thing you were going to say to the people learning the game. So yeah, I think that it's one of the things that maybe setting expectations. That's one thing I've learned in life when you're dealing with other people. It's really good. Set expectations beforehand. If you would rather people, if the game is such where questions might be do more interrupting and slow down the rules explanation than help, tell them, yes, let's save the questions till the end. Just kind of setting that expectation up front might be the solution for that. But we've all been there, Bob, and sometimes it makes sense to ask those questions. Sometimes a person teaching the rules misses something that they don't realize. They're so used to explaining the rules they don't realize that they've missed something. But other times it's one of the things that just, if you had waited 2 more seconds, I would have explained that next. So setting expectations, I think, there might help. Here we go. Vagrantia. I hope I'm saying that right. They mention several part statement here. A friend spilled his cup of water over my case of 5 tribes once, and we all worked quickly to save the pieces. We did a good job in doing so, as there were only a few pieces that showed any water damage. A few coins, perhaps, I believe. My friend felt horrible, though, and I did my best to assure him that it wasn't a big deal. 2 days later, he came over with a brand new copy of 5 Tribes for my collection, and he took the slightly water-damaged one and added it to his own collection. Wow. That is... I think that shows... It's kind of a testament to your friend's character there, that they cared enough to do that. I think that a situation like that is something that the owner of the game and the people involved should work out among themselves. I think that was very gracious, though, of your friend. I always worry about that type of thing. You know, if I ruin this game, what am I going to do? Especially if it's a game that's out of print or difficult to find. I think, though, that level of consideration, though, is something that hopefully isn't a rarity in our gaming community. Awesome story, though, and an awesome friend there. Mike mentions, my solution to the whole loot grab attitude in D&D was to make a character who never took any treasure. They didn't believe in magic and only carried 30 pieces of silver. Well, that's a very interesting approach. Create a character who the character you're playing helps solve the problem. Kudos to that. That is a very inventive solution to it. Okay. Michael mentions, phone usage at the table is one of my biggest etiquette pet peeves. From my children to my friends, and fortunately I don't have any problems asking people to put them down. Just for sitting silently until they are ready to get back to the game at hand. Phones seem to be a large point of contention for a lot of people, and it's something that as they become more prevalent in our society and our daily activities for everything that we do, it is interesting how they conflict with the board gaming experience. I wonder if there will become more of an unwritten rule, very almost a board game or 10 Commandments about phone usage that will become the norm and kind of understood by everybody involved in board gaming, or if it'll just be kind of a house by house rule. It's just one of those things that's so prevalent. I wonder if set of rules will become the norm. We'll see. It's a little bit, but nothing where you go from one house to another and you know what to expect. Some people are going to want you to throw your phone in a box at the front door, apparently. So there's all sorts of different solutions. James says the following. Usually, when you join a new group, it takes time to integrate and assimilate. At least from what I have experienced from TTRPGs. Tabletop role-playing games, I assume. Yes, that is an important part of this. I'm talking about how the door swings both ways. The anxiety that can be caused by integrating and assimilating into a new group. Oh, how do you want to do this? How is it that you approach this type of thing? That can cause a lot of nervousness and anxiety and discomfort for people. And trying to accommodate and be cognizant of that can be a big part of not leading to situations that embarrass either one of the players and ruin the gaming experience for them. So yeah, I think that period of acclimation is an important thing for us to keep in mind as we go into this. Tying together the thread of discussion through this episode, the recurring theme here, Kabuki Kid comes back to tell us that yes, it is actually called mash shuffling. I did not make that up. Well, there we go. Learned something. I learned TTRPG and I learned mash shuffling. So see, this is as much an education for myself as for any other viewer. So I appreciate that. David mentions that mash shuffling could be dubbed nice shuffling or considerate shuffling. I sleeve my cards with thick sleeves to keep my cards intact. Nice shuffling and considerate shuffling would also be easier to say than mash shuffling because you have the two S's together, and so it might be worth considering. Oh, here's an interesting tidbit from Kabuki about shuffling still. There are new rules about shuffling in Magic tournaments. You are allowed to only pile shuffle once, and that is mainly to count your cards. So that's interesting in the tournament scene, how you shuffle has become even more than an etiquette thing, but a rule that they've instituted. That is really interesting, that merely the way that you shuffle can become that important in the tournament scene. That's very cool. Brandon mentions that table talk is always a touchy subject, usually more in Euro games. Different groups have different levels of acceptance of table talk. And my group, usually, they base it on the spirit of the game. And like I said, I think that's a good point. Taking the temperature of the room, how does everyone else feel about it, and being aware of everyone else's opinions and feelings on the matter. Michael mentions, we're going to pop through like 5 more here of the last couple minutes we have. Michael mentions, a lot of times in the spirit of fun, we'll make a game ruling and then look up the correct way after the game. This way we work towards the spirit of the game and the spirit of the fun. That is actually a really neat way to do it. Come to a community vote, and then after the game, go and see, were we right? Did we figure that out correctly? Don't know if that would work with every game, but that is a neat way to do it. Oda mentions, thankfully, since I play 100% solo, the only etiquette I need to worry about is don't bug me when I'm playing a game. Some problems have their own built-in solutions, don't they? Uncle Lucky mentions, I like to organize my games in a particular way when they are cleaned up. After I offer to clean up solo, but some people still try to help. Or I ask my wife to refresh drinks as a distraction. So here we have someone who wants their games put away a very certain way, goes out of their way to make sure no one else is trying to help. I have a few games I'm like that with too. David mentions, the rule book looking up, like you described, Chaz, is the way to go. Success! I should just end the comment here. That happened to me a couple of weeks ago. She approached it exactly the way that you mentioned, and then she corrected us in between turns. Oh yeah. So I would end there on such a high note of being right, but there's about 3 more comments. I'm going to just go through them real quick. Toyota mentions again, looking up rules is fine as long as you don't hold up gameplay while doing it. I agree. David mentions, Cheeto hands make me cringe. Yeah, Cheetos, oh boy. Yeah, no, please. Prahak mentions, I had a very close family member who saw that one of my cards had a feathered corner. So they very carefully, but still ripped the feathered part from the card, removing some of the front graphic. Oh. Yeah, that's something where the owner of the game should probably be the one who performs triage on game components in that situation. And Kabuki mentions, I have a friend that likes to eat Cheetos without a napkin when we play Magic. And I don't really care, though, since he never really has to touch my cards. He's just touching his own cards. And Toyota mentions, we're going to wrap up here. Eating while playing games, you have no soul. I'm going to amend that a little bit, just to say, specifically, in my opinion, eating Cheetos while playing games, yeah, that'll put your soul in question. So, with that, we are going to wrap up this conversation, which was very full of soul. So, I'm going to ask that you guys put any additional comments or questions that you had into the YouTube comments after this episode is posted. And those YouTube comments can be found on the Dice Tower YouTube channel. So while you're there, be sure to subscribe to both the Dice Tower and go over to the Pair of Dice Paradise specific YouTube channel and subscribe there for more board game news and reviews and commentary such as what we've partook in today. And also be sure to find us on Twitter and Facebook as well to continue the conversation there as well. In the meantime, until our next episode, I want to thank you all for participating in the chat. We've had old regulars come by. It's always great to meet you guys again. It's been so neat, the people I have met through the metagame. And it's also neat to always see new people mustering up the courage to post some comments. I always encourage first-time and new viewers to post as well, because it's always neat to get a mix of different people's voices in this show. Well, until next time, I want to thank you again for taking this time to play the metagame with me, and I will see you again soon. And until then, take care.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.